Here I am back with another video, and in this video we are going to kind of continue the paper we discussed in the previous video. So I believe it's a chapter 2 and 3 based MCQ paper. Yeah, so the questions we had in that paper were from chapter 2 and 3, and there were about 25 questions, out of which we discussed 15 of them. So today I'm going to take you through the balance 10 questions in this video. And let me take you to the paper. Before that, one thing I want to tell you, when you're going through this video, make sure you completely go through the video entirely. Don't skip, don't kind of like fast forward through and only watch certain parts of the video, because to get a proper understanding of certain questions and how to do them, or how to do similar questions that we discuss here, questions that are similar to what we discuss here, you need to have a basic, proper understanding of everything I'm going to talk about in this video. So for that purpose, I ask you to go through this video in its entirety. Let's say you see a question that you are very familiar with, that you believe you are too good at. In that case, you can skip that question, no problem, right? But if not, make sure you give your complete, fullest attention, when you're going through this video in its entirety. Okay, with that, I'm gonna take you to the paper now. And yeah, question number 16 is a pretty basic question where you have a supply equation given, which is QS equals 100 plus 10 P. So that's in the basic form of a supply equation. So if you take the basic format, it goes like A plus B P. So A is 100, A is 100 units, B is 10. So that's given. Based on that, we have the supply equation. Now they are saying this supply equation is there, but at 5 rupee tax is now being imposed on this good. In that case, when you are finding the supply equation after tax, the format of the supply equation changes a little bit, and that it looks like this: A plus B. Earlier, you see, this price is pretty much what the producer gets by selling the product. Price is what the producer's revenue is by selling 1 unit. So when this price goes up, that means the producer's revenue from the product is going up, so they increase the supply. So pretty much that's the idea, right? But when tax is imposed, what happens? Quantity supplied drops. Supply will reduce. Why is that happening? Is because this price the producer gets will get affected by tax. Affected how? Affected negatively. When a tax is imposed, the producer has to pay that tax using the price they get. So out of the price, a certain part is now going out. Right? So like I was saying, you have the supply equation, which talks about when the price goes up, supply goes up. When the price comes down, supply comes down. So the logic behind that is, simply put, when the price goes up, that means what the producer is getting is going up. When that happens, supply goes up. When what the producer earns goes down, the supply comes down. So when tax is imposed, what's happening? What the producer gets is going down from the price only. Out of the price, now some part is going to the government. So overall, what the producer gets is decreasing. That's why when tax is imposed, supply comes down. So this is pretty much the format of a supply equation after tax. So you take this supply equation that you have, the A is 100, okay, no problem. You take the same thing, because only tax is being charged. A and B are pretty much right as of now is the same. So we'll keep it like that. 100 plus the slope is still 10, but P will be P, right? Minus, we know the tax amount, which is 5 rupees. Now you can simplify this. Now you can remove the brackets. So 100 plus 10 into P is 10P. 10 into minus 5 is minus 50. You can simplify this equation even further. 100 minus 50 is 50 plus 10p. So this is your new supply equation. This is your new supply equation, and I have explained how you find that. So remember, this is the supply equations format after tax. Okay, so if you just put all the values given in this format of equation and then simplify this equation in the best way possible, you will get your final answer to be the first one for this particular question, 50 plus 10p. Right, hope you guys got that. We'll move on to the next question now, and it's about, again, yeah, something related to tax. So we'll go through it. A certain product has an ordinary demand and ordinary supply, and rupees 10 unit tax was imposed on this. Which of the following can be expected after the tax? So it's pretty much they are talking about the effects of tax. Yeah, that's what they're asking, effects of tax in the market whenever a tax is imposed. So let's just draw this for now, the graphical presentation of the market before tax might look like this: supply, demand, zero, price, the quantity access, and then you have the equilibrium point. There you have the equilibrium price. There you have the equilibrium quantity. Just a rough depiction. So let's say the equilibrium price at first is 20, the quantity is 100. And a 10 rupee worth of tax is being imposed. That's what's given in the question also. Right? So first of all, you obviously might know this. When tax is imposed, what would happen to consumer surplus? It would drop. What would happen to producer surplus? Again, it would drop. The reason is, whenever a tax is imposed, before tax, this is the case. Now, this 20 is the equilibrium price. Why that is the equilibrium price? It's pretty much because actually, before tax, the equilibrium price, the buyer price, the producer price, everything will be the same. At 20 rupees, the producer sells the product. Consumer buys the product at 20 rupees itself. And remember, producer doesn't have to pay any taxes. Before tax, I'm talking. Producer doesn't have to pay any taxes. So what will happen is, the price the producer sells the product for happens to be the price the producer takes home for himself, 20 rupees. All good. Let's say when this 10 rupee tax is imposed, now the supply curve is shifting to the left, obviously. Right? Supply curve is shifting to the left. And as a result, you now have a new equilibrium price and quantity. Let's say the new equilibrium price is 26 rupees. What has happened now is, simply put, consumer is actually now going to pay a higher price. Earlier, they were paying only 20, consumer was paying only 20. Now, consumer is paying 26. So consumer's price, that is the buyer price, has gone up by 6 rupees. So you have to simply make sure you say that buyer price has not decreased, it has increased. So the third answer is out. Buyer price has increased, not decreased. And we already said consumer surplus, producer surplus are decreasing. So that answer is pretty much valid. We'll keep it like that and discuss the other ones a little bit, and then see whether the first one is the answer. Consumer price is increasing. It's not dropping. But producer price, if you see, actually is going to see a drop. Why? To find out the tax amount, you go to the new equilibrium point, right? From there, come to the old supply curve. The vertical gap between both these supply curves happens to be the unit tax amount. It will be equal to the tax value, that is 10 rupees. So this vertical gap in the graph will be equal to exactly 10 rupees. So from 26, if you come down by 10 rupees, you'll end up with 16 rupees. That we call is the producer price after tax. Why that's called the producer price after tax? It's because the new equilibrium price is 26. Producer sells it for 26 to customer, but after selling it for 26, producer has to pay 10 rupees to the government. No. So producer is left with how much? 16 rupees. We call it the producer price after tax. So producer price is what? Earlier the producer sold for 20, they got 20 itself. Now producer sells for 26, but they get only 16. Producer price has decreased. So producer price has decreased, consumer price has increased. So that's why third answer is out. Right? So that's one thing. And second answer talks about increase in consumer surplus. That's also out. Increase in social welfare and producer surplus. Producer surplus has dropped. Whenever tax is imposed, producer surplus drops. Why? Because again, this is the minimum supply price, right? Earlier, producer was selling for 20 rupees and selling 100 units. So that happens to be the producer surplus at that time, this triangle. This is the producer surplus earlier. Now what has happened? Producer now is selling at 26, but the producer gets only 16, no? 16, and the quantity he sells is here, and minimum supply price is here. So producer surplus is only this green triangle now. You see, there has been a drop. So producer surplus drops, right? So that's why the fourth answer is also out. Increase in buyer's price, increase in producer's price. We already established that buyer's price increases, producer price drops. So fifth answer is also out. So the correct answer is actually, we said producer surplus is dropping, right? Consumer surplus, how does it drop? I'll explain it now. Consumer surplus initially was this triangle, right? Maximum demand price minus equilibrium price into equilibrium quantity. That's the consumer surplus first. But after this tax being imposed, consumer price goes up. Here, maximum price is still here, maximum demand price, but the consumer price is here and the quantity also reduces. So this happens to be the consumer surplus after tax. So you see, consumer surplus also has stopped. So that's why answer to this question is the second one. When they say social welfare increase, that doesn't happen. We have studied that whenever tax is imposed, right, there will be a dead weight loss. Dead weight loss means there's a reduction, there's a loss, there's a decrease in social welfare. That's what dead weight loss means, right? Why? Because whenever tax is imposed, consumer surplus drops, producer surplus drops, government will earn a revenue. But if you tally off everything, as a society, we have the consumer, producer, and the government. All of three parties put together, that's the society. Government has earned something that the producer and consumers lost, but there will be a part that is lost by the consumer and producer, but not earned by the government. Right? Always the loss in consumer surplus and the producer surplus, if you combine and take that sum, that total loss in surplus will be greater than, will exceed the government's tax revenue. The amount by which the producer and the consumer surplus, the total amount exceeds the government's revenue, is the dead weight loss. That means as a society now, we have lost something due to tax, not seen any increase. That's what dead weight loss is. So dead weight loss is actually this triangle. Let me take another color. This triangle happens to be the dead weight loss. And that dead weight loss is actually equal to the decrease in social welfare. So there's no increase in social welfare, there's a decrease. So that's why none of the other answers are true, because the second, third, fourth, and fifth answers are completely wrong. Only the first one is correct. Hope you guys understood that. And then I move on to the next question. The quantity demanded of rice decreases as the price of rice increases because of the consumer's real income, what's happening, and the relative price, what's happening. That's what this question is about. So real income is pretty much related to the income effect of a price change, and the relative price is the substitution effect effect of the price change. So if we look at the real income side, what happens is whenever there's a price of there's a product, let's take the price and demand of that product. Let's say sugar, right? Now, this sugar let's say it's seeing an increase in the price. Sugar price is going up. When that happens, we assume the nominal income of the consumer is constant. But when the nominal income is constant, but the price of the product is going up, what will happen is consumer's real income, or rather we call it purchasing power, what will happen? It will drop. Since consumer is still earning the same income, but the price of the product has gone up. That means the consumer's purchasing ability of the product, that is the real income, will drop. As a result, consumers buy less. That's why one reason why quantity demanded of rice decreases as the price increase, because the quantity demanded of sugar has increased, and you see price of sugar has increased, quantity demanded of sugar has dropped. The reason is due to this real income drop. So answer can be this one or this one. Everything else is wrong. And then they're talking about the relative change in price. No. So when price of sugar goes up, why does the quantity demanded of sugar come down? One reason is the income effect. The other reason is the substitution effect of price change. So if you take sugar, a substitute for sugar would be jaggery. Let's take jaggery's price and quantity demanded. Jaggery's price is assumed to be constant because we are talking about only sugar here. No? So when price of sugar goes up, jaggery's price will be constant. But what will happen is people who buy jaggery will now people who buy sugar will now move on to buying jaggery, because the relative price, simply think of it as comparatively speaking, sugar becomes a relatively more expensive than jaggery now, right? As a result, what's going to happen? People who were buying sugar will now move to jaggery, and jaggery relatively will become less and less in price, kind of cheaper. So that's why people who are buying sugar now will move on to jaggery. That's the simplest way of understanding the relative price thing. But relative price, if you want to get a better understanding, in chapter 7, we talk about absolute price and relative price. There you'll get an even better understanding of what relative price is. But in this case, you can simply understand relative price here as in the sense of comparatively speaking, sugar becomes a relatively more expensive product compared to jaggery by this increase in price of sugar, right? So whenever price of sugar goes up, its relative price also will increase. As a result, only people will leave this product and go and buy the substitute more. So this product's demand will drop while the substitute's demand will go up. So the answer for this question is real income will drop, relative price will increase. Answer is the first one. Is that clear? I believe you guys are clear on that also, and that you have no doubts or anything in that anymore. With that, I'm gonna move on to the next question. 19th one. Again, another tax related question. Right. So if you have a look at this question, the following data represents market demand and supply schedules for commodity X over a period of time. If the government now introduces a subsidy of ₹20 per unit to be paid to the producer of commodity X, the new equilibrium price will be. A very, very interesting question. Remember this. To do this question, there are multiple ways. One is simply where you go and find out what's the demand equation using the demand schedule, find the supply equation using the supply schedule, and then using the supply equation and using the subsidy value, you find the new supply equation after subsidy, and then take the demand and the new supply equation, make them equal to one another. You can find out the new equilibrium price after subsidy, new equilibrium quantity after subsidy. But that's a big process, right? You have to put in some time. Not that hard though, simple, but it will take a little bit of time. But there's another way to do this question in a very, very simple manner. That is, you have to simply find out for the producer to supply the same quantities, after subsidy, what price the producer would expect, right? You have to kind of create another column in this table, and this column is about the price after subsidy. Producers supply price after subsidy, something like that. I'll explain it now. Here, it's a common column of price, no, for quantity demanded and quantity supplied. Just only look at the supply side of things. Let's assume this demand column is not there at all. It's not there at all. Just think of this as a supply schedule. So you have the price 80 and the table says producer is supplying 900 units. At price 70, producer is supplying 800 units. At price 40, producer is supplying 500 units. So what that means is, for the producer to supply 900 units, obviously they might have a certain amount of cost. No? So based on those costs, the producer is like, only if I get 80 rupees for myself, I'll be able to supply 900 units. If it's only 800 units, that means per unit 70 is enough for me to cover my costs and all, and also get a profit out of it. So that's how the producer decides their price and supplies. Now, think of it, take this into your head very clearly. This is the important part. So for producer to supply 900 units, what's the price the producer wants for himself? 80. Right? Producer wants 80 for himself. This is before subsidy. And you know, according to the question, the government is stepping in and they are providing 20 rupees subsidy for every unit the producer sells. That means to sell 900 units now, automatically for every unit, the producer will now get 20 from the government. Producer will now automatically get 20 from the government, right? That means producer needed how much to supply 900 units? Only 80 rupees to supply 900 units. Out of that 80, 20 comes from the government. 20 rupees comes from the government. And the producer required how much? Producer required 80 rupees. Right? Producer required 80 rupees. 20 rupees comes from the government. And what should be the price of the product now? That's, you know, the price charged from the consumer. That's supposed to be 60 only. That's supposed to be 60 only. Or to make it very simple, the price for 900 units after subsidy from the producer price for 900 units after subsidy goes like this. 80 is what the producer wanted earlier before subsidy to sell 900 units. But out of that 80, 20 rupees comes from the consumers. Sorry, the government as subsidy. That means producer will now only require 60 rupees from the producer. Sorry, 60 rupees from the consumer. My bad. Right? So 80 is what the producer wants. Out of that 80, 20 comes from the government. So producer will now price the product at 60 and charge it from the consumer. So in total, 60 comes from the consumer, 20 comes from the government, producer gets 80, just like before. Before subsidy also, producer got 80 for 900 units. After subsidy also, producer is getting 80 rupees. But this time, 20 comes from the government, only 60 rupees from the consumer's hand. Whereas before subsidy, all 80 came from the consumer's hand. Now, likewise, you have to do this for each and every quantity given in the table. So for 900 units, 80 minus 20 is 60. So for 800 units, 70 was the earlier before subsidy price. From that, government is giving 20. That means the price of the product will now be only 50 rupees. Likewise, for 700 units earlier 60, reduce 20 from it. Now the price will be 40. For 600 units earlier 50 is what producer wanted. After subsidy, producer will want 30 from the consumer's price. 20 will be coming from the government. For 500 units, producer earlier charged 40 from the consumers. Now the producer will only charge 20 because government will pay the balance 20. So that's the new producer prices after subsidy. Okay, right? That's the scenario now. Okay, so just now we'll take this quantity demanded schedule in, and remember this is the demand schedule now, and this is the supply schedule after subsidy. Okay, supply schedule after subsidy. If that's the case, see, for 60 rupee price, producer says they'll be selling 900 units, but the consumer says they'll be selling 700 units. So they'll be buying 700 units. So there's no equilibrium there. For 50 rupee price, if you have a look, for 50 rupee price, producer is telling they are ready to sell 800 units. Take that 50 rupee in the demand schedule. For 50 rupee price, consumer agrees to buy 800 units. Now, you see producer price, consumer price are equal at 50, and at that price, demand and supply are also equal. So the answer for this question is 50 rupees is the new equilibrium price after the subsidy of 20 being provided. A very simple method to do this question, like I already explained. If you want, like I said, you can go and do the other method where you use the demand and supply equations and find the answer also. But remember, for that, you have to find the new supply equation after subsidy also to do this question. That's all. Pretty simple. And that's how you do this question. I hope you guys understood this. We'll move on to the next question now. And the next question again is related to something we did, I think, in the previous class, related to tax incidence and PES and PED. This one is relatively only based on PES, I think. We'll look into it. But the following is the supply curve of a certain product. Which of the following is correct in explaining the tax burden of producer and consumer based on the QS curve? First of all, you need to remember the tax incidence is decided by two determinants, PED, PES. Here, we only have the supply curve. That means it's about only PES, right? So you have the supply curve in a specific shape here, and it's originating from the price axis. That means what's the PES type? It's elastic, right? This is a relatively elastic supply curve. And remember, earlier in the, I think in the previous video, you might have come across a similar question about petrol having inelastic demand and elastic supply. They are also elastic supply. Here also elastic supply. So when the supply is elastic, that means the producer has more control over the supply of the product. The producer has more control over the supply of the product. What that means is, when the price goes up only a little, the producer can supply a lot more because they have more control over the product supply. When the price comes down, they can quickly store the product more and maybe reduce the supply of the product quickly in a big way. That's what elastic supply is. Now, in such situation where the producer has more control over the product supply and a tax is being imposed on the product, what the producer will do is they will pass over most of the burden to the consumers, and they'll bear as little as possible only because they have more control over the supply of the product, right? That's how elastic supply works. And if you want, you can draw it in a graph and look at it also. Let's say this is your demand curve, right? That's your demand curve, and you have your initial equilibrium that is here, price and quantity here. This is the price, equilibrium price one. Let's put a value for it just to make it simpler for you. 20. Here, let's say it's 80. And then let's say due to tax, the supply curve is shifting to the left. Right, supply curve is shifting to the left. And when that happens, you have a new supply curve, you have a new equilibrium point. Right, you have a new supply curve, you have a new equilibrium point also, equilibrium price and quantity, all okay. Right, in that scenario, if you see from 20, the equilibrium price has gone up. Now that is the consumer's burden part of tax, this part. That is the consumer's burden. Producer's burden, if you take the total tax amount, out of that, consumer is taking that red area share, then producer will take the rest. So tax amount is this, the vertical gap between both the supply curves. That is the tax amount. So if you go to the new equilibrium point, from there you have to come to the old supply curve. That's the easiest method to find the tax amount. The vertical gap between both the supply curves is that. Now from there, you see, you can come to the price axis. You will have the producer's price, right? Producer's price. So if the new equilibrium price is 27, from 27, let's say the tax amount is 10. So you are deducting 10. That means you'll end up at 17 rupees being the producer's price. 27 is what the producer sells the product at, but 10 rupee goes to the government from the producer. Producer only gets 17 rupees. Whereas earlier, producer sold for 20, they got the whole 20 for themselves. So the producer's loss is what? This 3 rupees per unit. That part is the producer's burden of tax. And as you can see, consumer's burden is 7 rupees, producer's burden is only 3 rupees. Consumer earlier was paying 20, now paying 27, 7 rupees extra. Producer earlier was getting 20, but now they are getting only 17. So producer's burden is only 3, consumer's burden is 7. That's the total tax, 7 plus 3, 10 rupees. So who is bearing most of the tax now? Consumer is bearing most of the tax, producer is bearing only a small amount of tax. So the answer for that question will be the second one. The same like the previous petrol question we did in the previous paper. I think it was the 15th last question we did in the previous video. You can go and have a look at that also for an extended explanation, but still to get a proper understanding of all these tax incidents and how PED and PES affects the tax incidents, go and revise that part in chapter 3. Then only you'll get a perfect understanding of this whole part. And with that, I'm gonna move to the next question, which talks about, again, I think something similar to subsidy or tax. We'll see what that is. Diagram shows the supply and demand curves for public transport in a municipality with the price of OP. Okay, so price is here. This is the price of the product, OP, 0P actually. The municipality decides to provide this transport service free of charge to all those who wish to use it. The consumer surplus will be what? Okay, first of all, the equilibrium is here. No? This is the equilibrium price. This is the equilibrium quantity. So that's the first part. That means what's the consumer surplus? Consumer surplus initially from M, that's the maximum demand price. This part, the price the consumer pays is P initially, and the quantity they buy is Q. That is, so here. So this triangle would be the consumer surplus first. That's the consumer surplus at first. Now, consumer surplus, after this product being given for free, what's the price the consumer is now paying? 0, nothing. So consumer pays nothing. What was the maximum demand price? That is the M. And what's the quantity they'll be buying? At 0 price, if you see demand is here, T point. So now consumer surplus will be this MTO triangle. Right? So you can see consumer surplus is increasing. Right? Consumer surplus is increasing, and that's what they're asking. Consumer surplus has increased by how much? It has not reduced, so that's out. Increased by how much is simply, you see, earlier it was only MPE, now it's MTO. That means what's the addition to consumer surplus? That is this area. Let me highlight those dots. PETO. Or you can say it like, if you're starting from O, OPET. This is the answer, OPET. So that is the answer, OPET. That's the addition to the consumer surplus. Pretty simple, right? Very simple, but you need to understand how it works. They are giving it for free. That means zero price. So the quantity demanded will obviously increase as well. So you have to kind of think of it that way and find out how will the consumer surplus become after the product being sold at zero price. Okay. So that's about it for this question. Let's look at the next one. And before I move to the next question, I'll just cover one thing. Here, they didn't say there's a subsidy being given. Right? If subsidy is given, the supply curve might shift. They didn't say anything about supply increasing, but here I have said that the new equilibrium price will be zero and the quantity will be at T. How did I decide that? It's based on the question. In the question, they have said the municipality decides to provide this transport service free of charge to all those who wish to use it. To all those who wish to use it. And that made me, that kind of made me decide, since you know, if the price is zero, you see the demand is here at T point. Right? And that's how I decided that T quantity is being bought by the consumers. Consumers are getting the whole thing because in the question they have said, municipality has decided to give the product free of charge to everyone who wants the product. So everyone who wants the product, based on that only we have this demand point. So that's why I took that point and did the question. Right? So answer is the fourth one, OPET. 22nd question, again, another tax or subsidy related question. We'll see what this is. Above curve, okay, above graph actually, illustrates the changes created in an equilibrium market due to imposition of unit tax by the government. Right? Find the correct answer related to consumer expenditure, producer price, and price paid by the consumer after tax. So this is similar to something we already discussed in previous question. In those questions also, I talked about what is producer price, how will the consumer price be, all of those stuff. So we'll have a look. Now, they are asking after tax, what will be the consumer expenditure, producer price, and price paid by the consumer. Right. So we have a table also. So here it is. So this is the equilibrium now. That is after tax. So after tax, what's the consumer's expenditure? Consumer is paying, according to the question, 24 rupees, and they are buying 60 units. So 60 into 24 will be the consumer's expenditure. Right? 60 into 24. Consumer expenditure is that 60 into 24. So 60 into 24 is how much? You guys can quickly measure. You can see it will be something around 1,440, I believe. Right? 1,440 rupees. Then price received by producer. That is the producer price after tax. Right? Price received by producer after tax. Now we are talking about this is also after tax. This is also after tax. Producer sells the product for 24, and you see the tax amount is the vertical gap between both the supply curves. So I'm coming from the top equilibrium point, the new supply curve, to the old supply curve, and the producer's price after tax is 16. So that is 16. Right. So now itself, I know the answer has to be the third one because the first two are correct and none of the others are matching. So the third question, the third answer has to be the answer, but we'll look at the price paid by the consumer also. That is obviously 24. Consumer is paying 24. No, that's easy. That's the new equilibrium price. Consumer pays that price. Answer is the third answer for this question. Right. So with that, we'll move on to the next question. So answer is the third one. Next again is about, I think it's the same question like the previous one. It's actually the same question, is it? Yeah. So it's actually this question we did. 19th question is the same thing is presented here, the same table also, but the question answer order is a little different, is it? Yeah, but still the answer is the second one, 50 rupees. Right, answer is the second one, 50 rupees. I'm not sure whether you guys noticed it. So those who noticed it and got 50 for the previous one, for this also, you might have received 50. That means jackpot. So 24th question, effective minimum price. Nice. If effective minimum price policy is removed, first of all, you need to know what is minimum price, right? And minimum price is all about whenever the market equilibrium price is kind of unfair to the producer, government steps in and they'll set an artificial legal minimum price to protect the producer. That's minimum price. What that simply means is if the government says 10 rupees is the minimum price, that means no one can sell the product below 10 rupees. 10 would become the lowest price that can be charged for that particular good. And effective minimum price means, for example, if you take minimum price, it means it might, you can present it like this. So you have demand, you have supply, you have the equilibrium price, right? And let's say that equilibrium price is 20 and the quantity is 100. Supply, demand, the equilibrium point, price 0, and you have quantity. Now, this 20, let's say, is based on demand and supply, but this is unfair, not enough for the producer. So the government is saying they are setting an minimum price. But minimum price can be like anywhere. Let's say the government is setting a minimum price of, for example, 10 rupees or 14 rupees minimum price. If the government sets 14 rupees as the minimum price, what will that mean is no one can sell below 14. And 20 rupees is above 14. So producers and consumers will still do business at 20 rupees itself. It won't change anything. 20 was unfair to the producer, right? So to protect the producers, when the government is setting a minimum price, they should make sure the minimum price that is set is above the equilibrium. Then only that minimum price will be called effective minimum price. So let's say if the minimum price is set at 24, what that means is now producers can't sell at 20 anymore because government is legally saying 24 has to be the minimum price. No one can sell below 24. So automatically price goes from 20 to 24 and no one is going to sell at 28 or 30 because some people will be sticking to 24 only. Right? Because government has said minimum price is 24. No, what that means is everyone will now stick to that 24 floor price. Minimum price also is called floor price. So 24 will be the floor price. You can't go below that. If you want, you can go above, but pretty much everyone will stick to that floor price itself, 24. Right? Now they're asking, and also I told you, if the minimum price is above the market equilibrium price, we call it effective minimum price. Okay. Now, if that minimum price policy is removed, right? At this minimum price, you see supply is here, demand is here, right? Let's say supply is more than 100, no, so I'll just put a value like 125. Demand is less than 100, so I'll just put a value like 70, right? So with minimum price, supply is 125, demand is 70. For example, if that minimum price policy is removed, if this minimum price 24 is removed, what will happen? What will happen? That means the price will now come back to 20 rupees. If the minimum price is removed, what will happen? The price will come back to 20 now. So if it's coming back to 20, what will happen? The price of the product is going to get reduced That's one thing, right? Another thing that's going to happen is quantity supplied will drop, quantity demanded will increase. Quantity supplied will drop, quantity demanded will increase. So sales quantity actually earlier at 24 was the price means, even though producers were selling 125, only 70 units might have been bought. So sales would have been only 70 units. So sales quantity will not remain constant, it will increase actually, because more people will demand now, because the demand is 100 now, right? Consumer surplus actually will increase, because earlier consumers were paying 24, now they are only paying 20, right? Consumer surplus will increase. Producer surplus will drop, because producer earlier was, that's actually debatable based on certain things we'll have to find out. If producer was able to sell all 125 units, that means producer surplus would have been here, right? But now producer surplus has come back to this small triangle, right? Or if the producer was only being able to sell 70 units, that means producer surplus would have been this. Right now, that would have changed a little bit to this. I'll go with another color, to this, if the minimum price is removed. So as you can see, based on the area, I think you can see a small reduction in producer surplus also, but you have to actually do the calculation to find that out. But you don't need to go all those places because, like I said, when the minimum price is removed, automatically what's going to happen? Price of the product first, that's what's going to happen. Price of the product will get reduced from 24 minimum price to the normal equivalent price of 20. Price will get reduced. So the answer to this question is the first one. Price will get reduced. Last question of this paper, the market demand and supply curves for agricultural goods are given below. As a price supporting policy, if deficiency payment system is practiced to certify the 50 rupee of minimum price introduced by the government, the price paid by the consumer per unit and the unit cost of the government respectively are. Okay, now I'll explain to you what is this deficiency payment scheme, minimum price and everything. Okay, now simply think of it like this. There's a product for which the market price is about 50 rupees. Okay, it's about 50 rupees. And when that 50 rupees price is set, it's kind of unfair to the producer. So the government comes in, they set a minimum price of 60 rupees, right? But when they set that 60 rupees, what will happen is, obviously we know that supply will increase because the price has gone up from 50 to 60, but demand will drop because the price has gone up from 50 to 60. Price increase, that means quantity demand drops. So what will happen here is, even though the supply goes up, demand drops. That's not good, right? As a result, even though government came in and set the 60 rupee as the minimum price, the producers won't necessarily get that 60 rupees, right? That means the minimum price is not meaningful at all. But if we take that same example here, in this question, the initial equilibrium you can see is 40. Units, equilibrium units is 8. But they are saying the government is coming in and they are setting minimum price at 50 and minimum price at 50. So let's say they have set that minimum price at 50. If there's no deficiency payment scheme or any price supporting government, policies backing up this minimum price of 50, what will happen is, you can see when the price goes to 50, supply goes up to 10, demand drops to 6. That means producers are bringing in 10 units of products, but consumers are only buying 6 units. Then what will happen? This additional 4 units, we call it excess supply. Producers have brought them to the market, but no one is buying them at 50 rupees price. So all those 4 units will be unsold, not sold at all, available just at the shop. No one to buy those. That's a loss for the producer. No, producer brought more, 10 units now, and consumers are only buying 6 units. And that's not good. So what will happen is, producers will try to sell off all 10 now. So if they want to sell all 10 now, what the producers will do is, they will look at, okay, I have 10 units with me, what is the price consumers are ready to pay for those 10 units. They'll go, check that. They'll find out the demand price for 10 units is 30. And they'll sell products at this 30 rupees and call it the discounted price. Why? Because they have 10 units now. They want to sell all 10 units. To sell off all 10 units, they are forced to sell it at 30 because consumers will buy 10 units only if the price is 30. Now, if you look at the whole story, 40 was the initial price before the government came in and set minimum price. That 40 itself was unfair to the producer. That's why government came in and set 50 as the minimum price. When they did that, what has happened? At the end, producers are now selling the product at 30 rupees. 40 itself was unfair. Now 30 is way too unfair. So this is not good for the producer, obviously not good for the government also, because they only came up with this policy. So what will the government do is, they will they have set the minimum price, but the minimum price is not meaningful. No. So the government will, along with the minimum price, they will also put something called a price supporting policy. There are two types of price supporting policies. One is price supporting government purchase. Number two is deficiency payment system or deficiency payment scheme. So this question talks about that deficiency payment scheme. And what that means is, simply, government will tell the producers, okay, producer, you have brought 10 units. I have promised you 50 rupees minimum. Trusting me, you have brought 10 units. Okay. Now the problem is, consumers are not ready to buy all 10 units at the 50 rupee minimum price. Consumers are not ready to do that. So what you do now is, you sell off all your 10 units to the consumers at whatever the price consumers are willing to pay. And that price in this question is 30 rupees. So government will tell producers, okay, you sell off all the products at the discounted price of 30 to the consumers. That means you will be, somehow you have sold off all your 10 units at 30 rupees. But as the government, I promised you what? The minimum price was 50. The minimum price was 50. So the government promised producer 50 rupees. Consumers have paid, out of that 50, consumers have paid only 30 rupees. So there's a deficiency of 20 rupees here when it comes to what was promised to the producer. Now that amount government will pay for every single unit. Now this amount that the government pays for every unit that is sold by the producer is called deficiency payment. So under deficiency payment system, what happens is, government will tell the producers, okay, producer, you have brought 10 units expecting 50 rupees for every single unit. But what has happened? Consumers are only ready to buy all 10 units at 30 rupee price, right? As a result, you are now not getting what is promised to you. And that shortage amount of how much? 20 rupees for all 10 units you sell will be given by the government. So that yellow box is the deficiency payment, total deficiency payment of the government. For one unit, it's 20 rupees, but the government will pay not for one unit, no, for all 10 units sold. So 10 into 20, 200 rupees will be government's expenditure. Government's expenditure. So, but the question is asking about the price paid by consumer per unit, that is 30. The unit cost of the government respectively is 20. So the answer is that 30 and 20. 30 and 20. Answer number 1 for this question. And remember, whenever a minimum price is set, right? Whenever a minimum price is set, and along with, normally this is minimum price, right? Government has set 50 rupees as minimum price. But once this minimum price is backed up by any price supporting policy, a deficiency payment system or price supporting government purchase, anything, that minimum price will now be called as certified price or guaranteed price? Because 50 now is guaranteed for sure for producer, right? In this question, that's what happened. No, producer somehow got 50 rupees, whether it's coming from consumer or the government, it doesn't matter for the producer. No, producer somehow got the whole 50 rupees. Somehow he's not bothered about whether it's coming from the consumer or the government. So that's what deficiency payment system is. And I believe you guys understood everything that we did in this question. If you have any doubts in whatever we did, send me a message, mentioning the question or whatever the doubt you have, so that I'll try to maybe make a video again to explain that particular part that you have a doubt in, or maybe in WhatsApp itself, I'll just send a voice note explaining whatever the doubts you have. And in the next video, we'll take another paper and go through the questions, kind of an extensive discussion of those questions, whatever we had in that paper, and make sure every paper discussion video that I put out, first do the paper, then look at the discussion. So I'll try to add the link of the PDF document of the paper as as a caption or in the description part, so that you can go and download that and do it yourself. Like I said, before you come and watch this video, make sure you guys have a look at that paper and do it yourself, so that you can get more out of these discussion sessions. See you all with another paper, another video. Have a great day.